There are photos that shouldn't matter, and yet they do. It was an ordinary Tuesday when I scrolled too far back into my gallery, past the vacations, the birthdays, the safe snapshots of a predictable life. I landed on a picture from years ago, me, in the bathroom mirror, hair messy from wind, crimson lipstick slightly smeared, bra strap intentionally showing under a loose white shirt. My smile wasn't polished. It was hungry, unfiltered. I didn't recognize myself, not because I had changed, but because I had buried her that same afternoon. I was driving alone to a friend's birthday out of town, a rare occasion just one night. He couldn't come. Some things at the office to sort out, he said. I didn't insist. The silence in the car was oddly comfortable. It gave me room to breathe without pretending. I wasn't running away, I was just moving. The small town welcomed me with sleepy streets and a breeze that smelled of dust and baking bread. Before checking into the guest house, I stopped at a cafe near the roundabout. Its windows were wide open, jazz spilling softly from the speakers. I ordered a cappuccino, expecting nothing, needing only caffeine and quiet. But then he appeared behind the counter, tall, dark-skinned, clean-shaven, with eyes that lingered too long. Not rudely, but knowingly. "You want something sweet?" he asked after handing me the cup. His voice was smooth, not put on. Real. The kind of voice that doesn't ask out of protocol. "No, thank you," I replied, reflexively polite. He tilted his head slightly, a smirk tugging at one side of his mouth. "You sure?" "People usually regret saying no to dessert," I smiled. And for some reason, I didn't rush away. I sat at a table by the window and let the heat of the coffee warm my palms. I watched people I'd never meet, walking dogs or carrying groceries, existing with no awareness of me. For a few minutes, I didn't belong to anyone. The coffee was good, but I knew that wasn't why I stayed longer than needed. Later that night, the celebration blurred into predictable conversations and glasses clinking over old stories I'd already heard. I laughed where expected, nodded where polite. I didn't drink much, just enough to feel less restrained. When I excused myself around 11, nobody protested. I wasn't the center of anything there. The guest house was quiet, a 2-story building, with old floral wallpaper and soft carpets that muffled my steps. My room faced the parking lot. As I searched my purse for the key, a voice startled me. "Didn't expect to see you again?" I turned. It was him, still in the same black shirt from the cafe, slightly rumpled now, sleeves rolled up, arms folded casually. He leaned against the building like he belonged there. "I could say the same," I said. He stepped forward. "Forgot something?" "My key," I murmured, fumbling more from the pulse that had jumped in my neck than from any real difficulty. He pointed to my hand. "It's in your other pocket. I found it." Of course it was. He didn't move to leave. "Good night," I said, not quite meaning it. "You too," he replied, eyes still on me. Not suggestive, but steady. Measuring. His presence wasn't aggressive. It was warm, grounded, but it left a weight in the air, like the room hadn't enough oxygen. Inside, I peeled off my jacket and shoes, sat on the edge of the bed, and listened to the sound of nothing. My phone buzzed with a message from my husband. "All okay?" I typed, "Fine, quiet, going to sleep early." And then I looked back at the mirror. My reflection wore a long-sleeved blouse and jeans, hair pinned back, safe, boring, gone. I opened the suitcase and pulled out the lace lingerie I'd packed without reason. Black, delicate, untouched since last year. I didn't put it on, I just held it. Felt the fabric with my fingertips. What would it feel like to be seen again? Not appreciated, not respected, seen. Not by someone who already knows how you take your coffee and which shoulder hurts when you sleep wrong, but by someone who doesn't owe you love, who chooses desire. When I turned off the lamp, the night didn't settle gently. It pressed against my skin like static, like a whisper that hadn't been said yet. And I knew, even if I never admitted it, that something had shifted. I didn't sleep well, not because of guilt, but because for the first time in years I was wide awake. The morning after didn't feel like consequence. It felt like a door left ajar. I showered quickly. Not because I had plans, but because the heat of the water against my skin stirred something restless. I let the steam linger longer than necessary, and ran my fingers over my legs more slowly than usual while shaving, as if remembering the shape of myself. Not for him. Not for my husband. Just for the version of me that hadn't felt anything vivid in a while. I chose my clothes carefully, more out of instinct than intent. Soft beige blouse, slightly unbuttoned at the collar, jeans that sat a little tighter on my hips than comfort dictated. And underneath, black lace, the same one from last night. I hadn't worn it in over a year. Maybe longer. No one would see it. But I would know. Downstairs, the lobby smelled of citrus and freshly mopped floors. I handed the key to the older woman at the desk, exchanged pleasantries, and stepped outside into the pale morning light. The sky was indecisive. Clouds hovered, unwilling to break into rain or retreat into blue. My car sat alone in the gravel parking lot, just beyond the entrance of the small cafe. I didn't mean to glance toward it, but I did. Of course I did. He was there again. He stood at the counter, wiping it down slowly, music playing faintly behind him. He didn't see me at first, or maybe he did and pretended not to. I lingered by the driver's door, hand on the handle, debating nothing. I walked inside. Coffee? He asked without looking up. I was going to say goodbye, I said, surprised at how flat my voice sounded. He looked at me then, eyebrows raised in mock offense. No one says goodbye over dry lips. I sat down at the counter. He poured me a coffee. Black. I hadn't drunk it that way since college, but I didn't correct him. I sipped. It was bitter and honest. His hands moved with an unhurried confidence, like he knew how to fill silence without forcing it. The cafe was empty. We didn't talk much, and yet I didn't want to leave. I could give you a pastry for the road, he offered eventually. But you don't strike me as someone who eats sugar in the morning. I tilted my head. What do I strike you as? His smile didn't shift, but his eyes darkened. Someone who used to? The line hit something soft inside my ribs. I could have laughed, rolled my eyes, told him he didn't know me, but he wasn't wrong. I had been that woman once. I had licked sugar off her fingers without thinking who was watching. Now I barely touched desserts at all. It began to rain, slow. Deliberate drops against the windows like fingers drumming on glass. I hesitated before walking back to the car. He walked me out without asking. The parking lot was empty. My car door creaked open as I slid in. The air inside was stale. The seat cold. I turned the key, but the engine stalled. A soft, pitiful sputter. He was still there. I sighed, stepped out again, and checked under the hood. I knew nothing about engines, just shapes and wires and steam that shouldn't be there. He joined me, arms folded, dead battery, he guessed. Maybe you left the lights on. Maybe I forgot how to exist properly, I muttered. He smirked and leaned into the car. I'll give you a jump. Minutes later, cables ran between our vehicles like veins. We stood close, too close, but not touching. He handed me the keys again. Try it now. The car groaned, then purred to life. A small victory. I should have said thank you, started driving, left the town behind like a dream. Instead, I sat there, staring at the wheel. You okay? He asked, leaning in through the window. I nodded, but didn't start driving. Can I drop you somewhere? He paused. You offering because you feel bad or because you don't want to leave yet? I didn't answer. He took it as the latter. He got in, and I pulled out of the lot. The rain tapped softly against the roof as we drove in silence. His hand rested loosely on his knee. I kept my eyes on the road, but I could feel the way his body turned slightly toward me, relaxed, open, curious. My heart beat harder than the moment warranted. Do you always pick up strangers? He asked eventually. No. Do you always get into cars with women who won't look at you? He chuckled, low and real. Only the interesting ones. We parked by the edge of a wooded trail, a place he said he liked to walk after shifts. I didn't join him, but I didn't leave either. He leaned over suddenly, not hurried but deliberately. His hand didn't touch mine. He placed it near my wrist, close enough to feel the heat, far enough to let me say no. I didn't. You don't owe anyone anything right now, he said. It wasn't a seduction. It was a permission. Then he kissed me, not with hunger, but with certainty. His lips were warm, patient, not demanding. He didn't press further. He let the kiss speak for itself, and it said everything I had tried not to admit. My hand stayed on the steering wheel. My mouth answered his like a question I'd already asked in my dreams. And when he pulled back, I didn't chase the contact, but I missed it immediately. He got out without another word and walked toward the trees. I sat there long after the rain stopped, the engine still running. My hands didn't shake, my chest didn't ache, but somewhere in my stomach, something curled. Not regret. Not shame. Hunger. I didn't go home right away. The highway stretched before me like an invitation I hadn't requested. My hands gripped the wheel harder than they needed to, but I couldn't ease up. The air inside the car was thick with something I didn't have a name for, something that pressed against my chest like a question I didn't want to answer. I kept driving, not because I was lost, but because I didn't want to arrive. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the sun had already begun its descent. The windows of our house glowed with that soft, forgiving light that makes everything seem more beautiful than it is. For a moment, I stayed inside the car, watching the curtains flutter slightly in the breeze from an open window upstairs. Home, familiar, clean, but not safe. At least not for what I had brought back with me. Inside, he was in the kitchen, chopping something on the cutting board with precision, as always. He looked up, smiled the way he always did when he saw me. Warm, predictable, practiced. "You're home early," he said. "I thought you'd stay another day." I hung my coat, nodded. My words felt far away, like they belonged to someone else, just felt like coming back. He leaned over the counter and kissed my forehead. It was a gentle touch, one I'd appreciated 100 times before. But today it felt like a reminder that what we had was constructed brick by brick. Steady, durable, and entirely without fire, I went upstairs and stood in front of the mirror. My blouse was wrinkled, my lipstick faint. My hair had lost its shape hours ago. I looked like a woman returning from a weekend with friends. No one would guess there was something else beneath the surface. No one except me. Later that night, while he slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His breathing was slow, even. One arm was draped across his chest, the other by his side. He had always slept that way, ordered, contained. I studied. His profile, the familiar curve of his nose, the way his jaw clenched slightly even in rest. He was a good man, a kind man, but I couldn't remember the last time I had felt his touch and wanted it, not out of obligation, not out of habit, but out of need. The next morning, I chose my clothes carefully again, not flashy, not inappropriate, but deliberate. A fitted shirt with a low neckline, black trousers that clung to my hips. Underneath, a wine-colored lace set I hadn't worn in months. I didn't. Know what I was dressing for? Maybe no one. Maybe just for the feeling of it. While he sat at the table, scrolling through news on his tablet, I sipped coffee and watched him from across the room. His forehead creased slightly as he read something. Aloud, I nodded, but the words didn't register. I was too focused on the movement of his hands, the way they gripped the mug. Efficient, firm, steady. Not once did he look at me the way that man had. Not once did his gaze drop to my collarbone, or linger on the way my hair curved around my ear. He loved me, I knew that. But he didn't see me. That afternoon, I told him I had a meeting near the city. He offered to drive, but I declined. I needed to go alone. I didn't have a meeting, I had a destination. The cafe was half full when I arrived. It was a weekday, late afternoon. Most of the tables were occupied by students or couples absorbed in their phones. I stood near the door longer than I needed to, scanning. And then I saw him. At the far end, wiping a table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, neck bent slightly, focused. He didn't see me until I was only a few feet away. When he looked up, there was no surprise. Just something unreadable, almost calm. I ordered a drink without preamble and took a seat by the window. When he brought it over, he placed the cup down slowly, fingers brushing the edge of the saucer. He didn't say anything, neither did I. I stayed for over an hour. We didn't talk, but we didn't avoid each other either. Occasionally, our eyes met, and in those brief glances, something passed between us. Recognition, memory, curiosity, maybe guilt, I wasn't sure. When I left, I didn't say goodbye. He didn't stop me. But as I opened the door, he called after, "Me, you came back." I paused, my hand still on the handle. "I don't know why," I admitted. He smiled, small and knowing. "You don't need to." Back in the car, my hand shook slightly on the wheel. Not from fear, from adrenaline. I had done nothing, and yet everything had changed. At home, I sat on the edge of the bathtub and stared at the floor tiles. My reflection, in the mirror behind me, showed a woman with flushed cheeks and unreadable eyes. I touched the skin just above my heart. Where the blouse dipped low, it still tingled. Not from contact, but from possibility. That night, when he kissed me before bed, I kissed him back with practiced ease. He smiled, satisfied, unaware. I lay. Next to him in the dark, the sheets cool against my legs, my thoughts louder than the silence between us. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure who I wanted to be the next day, or with whom I had postponed the visit more than once. First because of work, then because of something else, an unease I couldn't name but couldn't ignore either. My friend had been insisting for weeks. "You're always working, come for a day, just to talk, to breathe." And so I agreed, not because I needed rest, but because I needed distance. From home, from him, from myself. She lived in the suburbs, in a familiar 2-story house, with a porch that creaked underfoot and a small yard cluttered with potted plants. Inside, the air smelled of roasted coffee and dried lavender with a hint of something sweet in the oven. It was comforting, like stepping into a memory that didn't belong to me but still made me feel safe. We talked about her son, her new obsession with pottery, our aging parents. I smiled at the right moments, sipped my coffee, nodded as she spoke about things I used to care about. My laughter was light but hollow. I kept one hand on my thigh under the table, fingers pressing gently into the fabric, just enough to ground myself, to remind my body I was still in it. In the middle of our conversation, she mentioned her gym. "You should come," she said. "It's new, actually kind of nice. And the trainer, well, he's a reason to go all by himself." She laughed, rolling her eyes. "But seriously, you'd like it." I wasn't planning to say yes, but I did. Maybe out of politeness, maybe out of curiosity. The gym was modern and open, with wide windows that let the late afternoon light spill across the polished floors. The music wasn't loud, but it had a pulse that felt like it was syncing with my heartbeat. We walked in, and almost immediately I saw him. He stood near the squat racks, correcting a client's posture with a firm hand and a neutral expression. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark-skinned, smooth under the lights, he moved slowly, deliberately, like someone aware of every inch of his own body, and every reaction it could provoke. There was nothing performative about him, just control. When our eyes met, it wasn't a jolt. It was a pull. His gaze didn't shift away politely like most men's did. He didn't smile. He simply looked steadily, like he already knew what I was doing there, even if I didn't. My friend introduced me quickly. Offhandedly, he nodded, said my name once, then added, "You have a strong posture." I didn't answer. The compliment wasn't flirtatious. It was clinical. But I felt heat bloom low in my stomach anyway. He joined us during the warm-up, demonstrating stretches. I watched his hands more than the movements, his fingers firm, precise, like they'd been taught not just how to support, but how to command. At one point, he adjusted my shoulder, just 2 fingers grazing my skin through the fabric. My breath caught. He didn't notice or pretended not to. Afterward, while my friend chatted with someone by the lockers, I stayed behind to refill my water bottle. He passed by slowly, nodded once, then said, "You don't use your full range. Your body's capable of more than you're letting it do." There was no suggestion in his tone, no insinuation, and yet it echoed in my spine like a challenge. That night, I didn't sleep. Not from guilt, not even from excitement. It was something else, a thrum that wouldn't settle, like I'd brushed against an electric wire and now couldn't discharge the current. At home, he didn't notice. My husband, he asked if I was tired, and I nodded. He kissed my temple, and I didn't pull away. But I didn't lean in either. My body sat there at the dinner table, hands around a warm bowl of soup, while my thoughts drifted backward, past the wooden floors of the gym, the cold metal of the water fountain, the faint pressure of his fingers. I stood in front of my closet the next morning, hand resting on a hanger that held a sleek black bodysuit I hadn't worn in years. It was too fitted for errands, too revealing for dinner with family, but perfect for a workout. I chose it without hesitation. Over it, I pulled on a loose zip-up, left it halfway open. In the mirror, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. My own body as a question, not a solution, not a duty, something asking to be felt again. I texted my friend, "Do you want to go to the gym again this week?" She replied almost immediately, "Thursday?" I typed yes, but didn't hit send. Instead, I opened a blank message to an unsaved number. His number, I still had it from the gym sign-up form. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't write anything. I just stared at the blinking cursor, like it could tell me who I was becoming. I didn't go to the gym with my friend that Thursday. I went alone the day before. The decision felt spontaneous, but it wasn't. I'd been circling around it for days, mentally rehearsing what I would wear, what I would say if he asked why I came without her. But when I walked into the gym, he didn't ask anything. He just looked at me, slow and steady, then nodded once and returned to his clipboard. I tried to ignore the way my pulse quickened. The bodysuit I wore clung to me with the familiarity of something intimate. Over it, a loose hoodie, just enough to pretend I wasn't deliberately exposing myself. Underneath, I wore a soft red lace bra. I didn't need support. I needed to feel like I had a secret. A layer of seduction no one could see but me. He didn't approach me until I was halfway through my stretching. I was seated on a mat, legs extended, arms above my head, spine long and exposed. I felt him before I saw him. His steps were quiet, but his presence wasn't. "You stretching or trying to convince me you don't need help?" He asked from behind. I turned my head slightly, not fully. Maybe both. He walked around to face me, crouched down slowly so our eyes were nearly level. His gaze was unreadable, but focused. "You breathe shallow," he said. "That's why you're tight," I didn't reply. My chest rose and fell deliberately now. He reached forward, placing 2 fingers gently at the top of my sternum. Not hard, just enough to feel the warmth of skin under fabric. "Breathe here," he said. I obeyed without thinking. That moment held a quiet in which I became acutely aware of how close his face was, the sharp line of his jaw, the veins in his forearms, the stillness of his body. Like he was always one breath away from motion, but never rushed into it. He didn't move his fingers, not at first. And I didn't move mine, though. They were curled tightly into the mat. Then he stood. "Come see me after," he said, "if you want to work on your range." That hour passed in a blur of half-effort and distraction. I went through the machines, the cardio, the usual routines, but none of it mattered. My eyes returned, to him more than they should have, watching how he coached others, how he used touch differently. Professional, distanced. With me, it had been slower, measured, almost exploratory. Afterward, I showered briefly and changed into fresh clothes, tight-fitting black pants and a button-down that clung at the waist. I didn't dry my hair completely. I didn't want to look like I tried too hard, but my skin was flushed, alive. He waited, by the stretching zone, towel around his neck, arms folded. When he saw me, he didn't smile, just gestured toward the empty studio room behind the mirrored wall. We stepped inside. He locked the door, not loudly, just the quiet turn of the latch that sent a jolt down my spine. The room was still, lit only by the fading light outside. He walked slowly to the center of the floor, stopped and turned. "Shoes off," he said. I obeyed. He asked me to kneel, then slowly rise into a standing stretch. His hands guided my movements, not intrusive, but certain. Each adjustment a study in restraint. His fingers at my hip, his palm on my lower back. I followed every cue without words. Something between us had shifted from suggestion to inevitability. At one point, his chest was close to my back, his voice low near my ear. "You've been holding tension here," he murmured, placing his hand at the base of my spine. I didn't trust my voice, so I didn't answer. Then he moved, slowly, deliberately, and faced me. His hand lifted, brushed a strand of damp hair from my cheek, and then he kissed me. It wasn't exploratory. It wasn't tentative. His lips found mine with calm force, like he had been mapping the route in his mind and finally followed through. My hands clung to his shirt, fingers tightening reflexively as he deepened the contact. There was no struggle for control, only surrender. It didn't last long. It didn't need to. When he pulled away, his breathing was even. Mine wasn't. He didn't speak, neither did I. I gathered my things with trembling hands and stepped out into the hallway, shoes untied, lips still tingling. I passed other clients, other trainers. No one looked, no one noticed. Outside, the air was cooler. The sun had dipped lower. I walked to the car slowly, as if my body didn't belong entirely to me yet. At home, my husband was in the kitchen, plating dinner. He looked up, smiling. "You're glowing," he said. "Workout went well?" I nodded. "Yeah, pushed myself today." He handed me a glass of wine. His fingers brushed mine. They were warm, familiar, but something in me recoiled, not outwardly, just deep beneath the surface. We ate in silence. He asked about work, the neighbor's dog, our summer plans. I responded when needed. I played the part I knew too well. That night, in bed, he reached for me under the sheets. I didn't stop him, but I didn't close my eyes either. I stared at the ceiling as his hands moved over my body, searching for something that used to be effortless between us. He kissed my neck, whispered my name. I responded with soft gasps. Appropriate. Expected. But my mind was elsewhere. My skin remembered another touch. My mouth remembered another taste. When he finished, he held me close, his breath slowing against my shoulder. "I missed this," he whispered. I didn't reply. I lay awake, for hours, staring into the dark, listening to the sound of his breath. And all I could think was, I want more. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. Outwardly, everything continued as it should. I worked, cooked, answered emails, texted friends back. At night, I lay next to the man I had shared a life with for over a decade, wrapped in the same sheets, breathing the same air. But something inside me had been rearranged, quietly, permanently. The second kiss hadn't been a mistake, nor a fantasy. It had been chosen. By my body, by my silence, by the way I had undressed so slowly in the locker room after it happened. Not from shame, from something else. Hunger, maybe, or clarity. And yet, I told no one, not my friend, not the man from the cafe, who hadn't messaged again, though I thought of him in passing. Not the trainer, who said nothing the next time I walked into the gym, though his hand lingered half a second longer when he adjusted the angle of my elbow. No one asked. And I offered nothing. Silence has its own kind of power when you know exactly what you're not saying. At home, I began to notice things I used to tune out. The sound of the fridge humming at night. The uneven way my husband folded laundry. Sleeves never matched. The fact that he never commented on what I wore anymore. I'd stand in the hallway mirror before leaving for errands or the gym, subtly adjusting the angle of my blouse, the tuck of fabric around my waist. Not once did he glance up to say, "You look good today." Maybe because he assumed I already knew. Maybe because he'd stopped seeing me that way altogether. He was kind. Still, he brought me coffee in the morning, placed his hand lightly at the small of my back when we passed each other in the kitchen, asked how I slept. But there was a distance in his touch now that felt less like routine and more like resignation, as if both of us were pretending the center hadn't shifted. One evening, he suggested a weekend away, just the two of us. A short trip, somewhere by the coast, he said, with clean sheets and sea air. A way to reset, though he didn't use that word. I agreed before I understood. Why I was hesitating, are you sure? He asked. I smiled. Of course, it sounds perfect. That night, I opened a blank document on my laptop and began to write a letter. Not to anyone, not to be sent, just to clear space inside my head. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I know this isn't it. I know how I'm supposed to feel when he touches me. And I know the absence too well now. It isn't about passion or betrayal. It's about something I haven't let myself want in years. I stopped, deleted the last sentence, closed the laptop. The next morning, I returned to the gym, not because I wanted to see him, but because I wanted to feel that hum beneath my skin again. The anticipation, the nearness of something that made me aware of myself. He was there. Of course he was. Dressed in black, clipboard in hand, posture loose but alert. I walked past him without speaking, pretending to focus on the machines. But I felt his eyes move with me. Not possessive, not romantic, just aware. I took my time. I let my body stretch longer than usual. Every movement deliberate. Not for him, not exactly, but not for him either. After my workout, I showered quickly and dressed in a plain white tee and soft denim jeans. No makeup, hair still damp, as I stepped outside into the crisp evening air. I saw him near the bike rack. Alone, leaning against the rail, drinking water. He saw me, nodded once, no smile. I wasn't sure you'd come back, he said. I shrugged. I didn't come for anything in particular. Good, he replied. That's usually when the real things happen. He didn't ask to see me again. He didn't lean in or touch my arm. There was nothing overt, but something passed between us, mutual understanding, tension held in place like a stretched wire. I walked to my car, keys clenched in one hand. I didn't look back. Later that night, as I folded laundry in the bedroom, I realized I had stopped checking my phone. Not for work, not for him, not for anyone. I didn't want distractions. I didn't want fantasy. I wanted to feel something real. The next day, I skipped the gym. Instead, I walked the city on my own. No errands, no plan, just aimless movement. I passed storefronts, breathed in exhaust and bread and spring rain. I stopped in front of a gallery I used to visit years ago, small, tucked between a florist and a bakery. The lights inside were warm, the windows fogged faintly from the humidity. I stepped in without thinking. Paintings lined the walls, some abstract, some filled with the kind of silence only oil on canvas can hold. One piece stopped me, a portrait of a woman seated at a table, one hand reaching for a glass of wine, the other resting on her thigh. Her face was turned just enough to reveal the tension in her neck, as if she were waiting for someone who might not come. I stood there for a long time. The attendant didn't speak to me. No one did. I liked that. On the way home, I took the long route, a detour through the part of town where nothing was familiar. I rolled the windows down, let the cold air bite at my cheeks. I wasn't trying to disappear, just trying to hear my own thoughts without interruption. At home, the lights were off. My husband had left a note on the counter. He'd gone to a late meeting, wouldn't be back before 10. I stood in the kitchen, barefoot. Holding the edge of the marble counter, I felt the house breathing around me, walls soaked in memories, corners full of comfort. I didn't hate this life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd grown too small inside it. I picked up my phone and opened a message thread, empty, still unsent. I typed, "I saw you today. You didn't ask, but I wished you had." Then I erased it. Then I typed, "Do you ever think about that kiss?" Then I erased that too. I stared at the screen, blank again. Then I locked the phone, set it face down, and walked upstairs. The hunger was still there, but I was beginning to understand it wasn't about him. It was about me. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the silence. Not the absence of noise, but the kind of silence that fills the space when something has shifted. A curtain pulled back, a breath held. I sat on the edge of the bed, feet cold against the wooden floor, listening for signs of life in the house. His footsteps, the sound of the kettle, the rustle of a shirt being ironed, nothing. I walked down the stairs slowly, half expecting him to be standing there with his usual mug of coffee. That unreadable smile he reserved for moments when something in me was distant. Instead, the kitchen was untouched. No used cup, no crumbs, no signs of breakfast. On the counter, a folded note. I didn't open it right away. My hand hovered over, fingertips grazing the edge. I had the irrational thought that opening it would make something irreversible, that once I saw what was inside, I'd have to decide whether I was going to keep pretending. Or not. When I finally unfolded it, I saw his handwriting. Neat, careful, almost too careful. I took the morning off. Thought you might want some time alone. You've seemed somewhere else lately. If there's something we should talk about, Here it wasn't accusatory, it wasn't suspicious. It was worse than that, it was kind. I stared at the paper, trying to absorb the weight of what wasn't said. He knew something was wrong. Not the details, not the moments, but the distance. And he was trying to reach across it with soft hands. But I couldn't meet him there. Not yet. I spent the morning. Drifting from room to room like a stranger in my own life, I pulled clothes from the laundry basket, folded them absently, rearranged books that didn't need rearranging, sat on the living room floor for a while, legs crossed, staring at nothing. In particular, the phone buzzed once around noon. A message, unknown number, tomorrow, 7 p.m., that gallery you like. No name, no emojis, just a location and a time. I read it 3 times before locking the phone again. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but anticipation, not because I didn't know what I wanted, but because I did. That night, I didn't sleep beside him, I lay beside him. Yes, but I wasn't there. My body curled slightly away, and though his hand brushed mine once in the dark, I didn't respond. He didn't try again. Maybe he didn't want to wake me. Or maybe he didn't want to wake whatever had settled between us. In the morning, we exchanged words like currency. How did you sleep? Fine. Need anything from the store? No, I'm good. He kissed my cheek before leaving for work. I closed the door behind him and stood there for a long time, hand still on the knob, feeling the emptiness expand in the space he'd just left. By afternoon, I had already chosen what I would wear. The dress was simple, navy, with a cut that hugged my waist and opened just enough at the collarbone to hint, but not shout. I wore flats, no lipstick, just a soft brush of blush and a thin line of mascara. I left my hair down, natural, touchable, underneath. The same red lace. It wasn't about seduction. It was about remembering who I could be when no one was looking. I arrived at the gallery. Just before 7, the lights were warm inside, soft jazz playing low through hidden speakers. I stepped through the door and let it close behind me. He was already there. Standing by a piece in the back, an abstract painting in muted earth tones textured like sand and ash. He turned when he heard my steps. No smile, just that same steady look, like nothing needed to be said out loud. We didn't touch. We didn't greet each other like old lovers or strangers. We stood side by side, gazing at the painting, letting the silence fill the space between us. He spoke first. You look different today. Do I? Yes. He didn't elaborate. I didn't ask him to. We moved slowly through the gallery, pausing at pieces without discussing them. Occasionally, our arms brushed, and the heat from those brief contacts spread through me like static. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't embarrassed. I was entirely present. After nearly an hour, we stopped by the same portrait I had stood before days earlier. The woman at the table, her body turned just enough to betray longing. She's waiting, I said. She knows he's not coming, he replied. I turned to him, eyebrows raised. But she hasn't left the table, I said. He looked at me then. Really looked. As if that single sentence had confirmed everything he suspected about me. Not just where I was, but who I was, beneath the choices I hadn't yet made. He stepped slightly closer. I can't give you a life, he said. I didn't ask for one. His hand brushed mine, barely there. We left through the back. No one noticed. The street outside was quiet, lights glowing amber along the sidewalk. He didn't ask if I wanted to go somewhere. He didn't offer to take me home. He walked me to my car and opened the door. Before I stepped in, I turned to face him. Our bodies close, not touching. His voice was low. You're not done choosing. I know. I got into the car, drove off without looking back, and still, the feeling followed me home. Not guilt. Not shame, certainty, the kind that comes just before everything changes. The certainty didn't fade. If anything, it crystallized the moment I walked through the front door and was met by the smell of rosemary and something slowly roasting in. The lights in the hallway were dimmed, the table set, 2 plates, 2 glasses, a bottle of wine unopened in the center. My heart dropped in that quiet, not from fear, but from the realization that he had tried. He had tried in the way men do, when they sense something slipping but don't have the language to hold it. Not accusations, not demands, just gestures. The food, the wine, the music playing low in the background. Probably from a playlist we'd made together years ago, back when making playlists still meant something. He emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, his face carefully unreadable. "You're late," he said softly. "I know. Everything okay?" "Yes," I lied. He didn't press, just nodded toward the table. "Sit, eat. I made your favorite." I sat, I ate, I smiled where necessary. We talked about things that didn't matter. His work, a neighbor who'd sold their house, a news story about travel restrictions. I laughed once, even, and all the while my skin felt tight. Not with guilt, with confinement, as if the walls of the home we'd built were no longer shelter, but something smaller, suffocating. When dinner ended, he cleared the plates. I poured us each a glass of wine and met him on the couch. He sat beside me, close but not touching, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest between us. I watched his profile, the way his jaw tensed when he was thinking too hard. The furrow between his brows deepened. Then he turned to me. "You've been different lately." I didn't answer. His voice was even, deliberate, not cold, just elsewhere. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to tell him he was imagining things. But I couldn't. Not because I didn't care, but because pretending would be worse than silence. He exhaled slowly, then reached for my hand. "I don't need to know everything. Just don't shut me out." I looked down at our hands. His fingers still strong, warm, familiar. But it was the familiarity that startled me. It was no longer a comfort. It was a memory I couldn't live inside anymore. That night we slept like we always did, side by side, separate. His breathing settled into its usual rhythm within minutes. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, heart racing with the weight of a choice that had already been made, even if I hadn't voiced it. Yet the next morning I left early. I told him I had errands. But I didn't go to the store. I didn't go to work. I drove instead to a park on the edge of the city, a place I hadn't been in years. It was mostly empty. Just a few joggers, a woman with a stroller, an old man feeding birds from a torn paper bag. I sat on a bench and watched the lake. The wind stirred the water gently, ripples forming and breaking in patterns that never repeated. I stared until my eyes blurred. I didn't cry. I didn't move. My phone buzzed. It was him, not. "My husband tonight, same place, no question mark, no hesitation." For a moment, I hated him for his confidence, for assuming I would come. And then I hated myself for knowing I would. The day passed in fragments. I tried to lose myself in tasks, laundry, emails, cooking, but everything felt hollow. Every time I looked at the clock, the numbers pulled me closer to evening. At 6, I changed, not into anything overt. A long coat over a fitted sweater, dark jeans, boots, hair loose again. No perfume, just a hint of moisturizer on my neck. The kind you only notice if you're close enough to deserve it. When I arrived at the gallery, the lights were already off. Only a sliver of light bled through the back entrance. The door opened before I could knock. He stepped aside wordlessly, letting me in. The space was quiet. Still, the walls lined with familiar images, though I couldn't focus on any of them. We didn't speak. He took my coat, hung it carefully. Then, with no ceremony, no performance, he walked to me, slow, deliberate, and brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. His fingers paused, just long enough for me to lean in, and I did. The kiss this time wasn't exploratory. It was inevitable. My hands clung to his shoulders, desperate and sure. His arms closed around my waist with the kind of pressure that didn't ask for permission. It confirmed something already agreed upon in silence. His mouth moved over mine in waves. Slow, then hungry, then slow again. His breath on my throat. His hands at the small of my back. Every inch of contact burned away hesitation. We broke apart once just to breathe. He looked at me then, not possessively, not even with desire, but with a kind of reverence, as if I had become something he never thought he'd touch again. "I knew you'd come," he said quietly, and I hated how right he was. I left after an hour, maybe more. Time had lost its meaning in that space. Driving home, I kept one hand on the wheel, the other pressed to my lips, still swollen, still remembering. When I entered the house, it was quiet. No dinner waiting, no wine, just the faint light from the hallway and a note on the stairs. "Had to stay late. Don't wait up." I stood there for a long time, note in hand, the weight of the evening still clinging to my skin. Upstairs, I undressed slowly, not from shame, but from the knowledge that I could no longer pretend to be one version of myself while secretly becoming another. Something had crossed over, and I didn't want to go back. The first lie is always the hardest. After that, it becomes choreography. You learn when to speak, how much to say. You smile at the right times. You nod through conversations. You touch his arm when he hands you your coffee. You laugh. You sit through dinner. You perform intimacy. Not because you're cruel, but because you're tired. Tired of explaining a hunger you can't name. Tired of pretending you don't feel it burning just under the surface, asking to be seen, touched, known again. But lies are greedy. They multiply. They spread. And eventually, they crack. It happened on a Sunday. Quiet, ordinary, the kind of day that doesn't warn you. We were in the kitchen, side by side. He was chopping vegetables. I was rinsing fruit. The radio was playing something soft. There was no tension in the air, no confrontation, just silence. One that had grown too heavy to ignore. I reached into the cupboard to grab a glass, and he suddenly said my name. Not loudly, not angrily, just firmly, like he'd been holding it. I know, he said. I froze. He didn't turn to look at me, just kept slicing, one piece after the next. Like the rhythm of the knife gave him courage. I don't know who, or when, or how, but I know. My throat went dry. My fingers tightened around the glass, not enough to shatter it, just enough to remember it could. The silence between us wasn't shocked, it wasn't dramatic, it was old, familiar, like he'd known for a long time, but had finally run out of space to store the knowing. I didn't answer. What could I say? He set the knife down, slowly, then leaned on the counter, hands flat against the granite. I kept thinking it would pass, that whatever you were going through, you'd come back. His voice didn't break, but his eyes did. And now I think, maybe, you don't want to. It wasn't an accusation. It was grief. I stood there, guilt pouring through me like ice. But beneath it, almost shamefully, was something else. Relief. Not because I had hurt him, but because the pretending was done. I walked upstairs without a word. He didn't follow. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I lay on the couch, curled under a blanket that didn't smell like him. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, mind quiet. For the first time in months, the war inside me had stopped. The damage was real. The wreckage, visible. There was nothing left to protect. In the morning, I packed a bag. Not much, just enough to say this wasn't impulsive. That I had thought about it. That I wasn't leaving in anger or fear. I was leaving because staying would be a worse betrayal than what I'd already done. I left a note, not an apology, just the truth. Finally written down. You were never cruel. You were never cold. You were never absent, but I disappeared long before I crossed any lines. And I'm sorry it took me this long to say it out loud. I didn't leave town. I didn't run. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city, above a bookstore, with creaky floors and a window that let in too much noise at night. I didn't tell anyone, not even him, especially not him. He tried to contact me. Once a short message. Are you okay? I didn't reply Because it wasn't about him anymore. It took weeks to settle into the new rhythm. At first, I waited for something dramatic. Tears, guilt, confrontation, but none came. Only silence. And in that silence, I began to breathe. Again, I visited the gallery often, not because I hoped he'd be there, but because the paintings no longer asked anything of me. They just were. And I could be too. One evening, weeks later, I walked in, and there he was. He didn't approach. Just nodded once from across the room. I nodded back. No kiss, no secret glances, no whispered invitations, just mutual understanding. Two people who had walked to the edge of something and chosen different ways down, I left before he did. Quietly. On the way out, I paused in front of the painting of the woman at the table again. She hadn't moved. The glass of wine was still untouched, her gaze still tilted just so, waiting for someone who might never come. But this time I didn't see myself in her. I saw a woman who had waited long enough and finally stood up.